Now, without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on 7 habits of an effective product leader. Let me give you an introduction to our distinguished and eminent speaker of tonight, Raghu Ramanujam. Raghu is the Director of Product at Flipkart and heads the payments and gift card programs, where his team's mission is to contribute to the Digital India initiative. As a product manager and an entrepreneur, Raghu has held product leadership roles at Zoho and InMobi, in addition to founding and running his ride-sharing startup, Pool Circle. Raghu firmly believes that the only way to measure the effectiveness of a product and its product manager is by the customer's success. A very warm welcome to you, Raghu. Thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you for having me, Shama and team IPL. Delighted to be here. Okay, so you have the control of the PowerPoint, or how does it work?
No, you can share your screen. So go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so let's go right away on this then. Okay, so how do we look at the interactions that are coming in? Because I'm on the present mode on the PowerPoint and not going to be able to see anything else apart from this. Is it okay? Are you going to be able to guide me through any of the comments?
No worries, Raghu. No problem at all. But you can also see the text in the chat box if you are interacting with the audiences. So that shouldn't interfere with the screen sharing.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can do that, but I'm also in the presentation mode on the laptop.
No worries. I'm here to moderate.
Okay. So thanks for taking time, folks. I mean, really appreciate taking time on a weekday evening, not even a Friday evening, but on a weekday evening to come in and talk about, learn about product management. I mean, I moved on to product management in Zoho, pretty much. That's where my product management career started, pretty much way back in 2003, 2004. Zoho was a great place to learn product management. Pretty much in 2003, 2004, there weren't too many product companies out of India. And Zoho was one of the few product companies that were operating out of India, which actually got what product management was. And product managers were extremely influential stakeholders as far as the Zoho ecosystem is concerned. Started pretty much as an engineer at Zoho. Spent 2 to 3 years writing poor JSP and Java code. Figured out that I was not going to be the best architect around and moved on to product management, and that's what I liked. Spent also the next 5 years after 2008, from 2008 to 2013, building products at InMobi, India's first unicorn, if you want to call it that. We raised about $200 million from SoftBank in 2011. Extremely exciting journey as far as what we built, the scale we achieved. InMobi essentially went from employees number 31, which is what I was, to about 900 people in about 4.5 years that I was there, right? And then between 2013 and 2016, 17, I ran my own startup, which was trying to make commuting very easy, right? It was a carpooling startup, which basically said, why do you want 3 empty seats going around in every single car? How do we use technology to solve that very fundamental problem, right? We all complain about Bangalore traffic, right? How do we solve that by leveraging empty seats on the car and not just creating more capacity, right? That's what Pool Circle tried to do. We could not scale, we could not raise a sort of funding that we wanted. So moved on in 2017, build products with Tambora Systems, a pretty interesting 5G startup, which was trying to provide quality assurance on mobile networks. For example, when you're on mobile network, it's used pretty much always on best effort, right? You have connectivity in some places, you don't have connectivity in some places, as simple as that. But this was a company which was trying to provide connectivity assurance on mobile networks, which was very unique, and I enjoyed my 3-year building products from then. And it was really mid 2020, less than about 10 months back, that I moved on to Flipkart. Yet another very, very interesting company out of India. So if you look at the profile that I've worked with, been extremely fortunate to work with three of the most iconic, I would say, Indian product companies. So absolutely consider myself totally blessed to be able to be part of that, right? So that is a very brief background, very brief background. What we are going to talk about today is about what does it take to be an effective a product leader, right? I mean, how do you distinguish a product leader, essentially a more senior product professional who not only is an individual contributor, but is also responsible for driving larger charters, also responsible for putting together a team, has more strategy and vision responsibility. How do you build a team like that? What are the habits of an effective product leader? Not so much a product manager, individual contributor role, but what are the key traits you need to build if you want to scale and move on to a product leadership role. You're talking about possibly a director of products or a VP, in some cases even group product manager kind of roles, where you're expected to not only be a strong individual contributor, but in fact, sometimes you're not even expected to be an individual contributor. You're measured based on the success of your team, right? How well you can put together a team, manage the team, and get the team aligned to the whole vision and take it from there, right? That's what we are going to talk about. The emphasis is on product leaders here, right? Let's get right away. The first point I'll talk about, right, is a strong product leader always puts the organization first, right? This may sound obvious, but not so obvious for those of you who have worked in large companies, right? There are prioritization exercises. There are inter-team cross-functional asks that come in, right? I mean, how do you ensure that you're not focusing on the specific team that you're part of, the specific charter you want to drive? Let's say I run payments in Flipkart, right? But if there is a cross-team prioritization that asks for a certain effort from a product team at payments and some other team, am I taking the right call in terms of putting what is more important for Flipkart and its customers, right? So that becomes a very important trait as you go on to a product leadership role. In an individual contributor role, it would be largely fine with your driving your own charter, pushing for your own numbers, hitting your own OKRs and metrics and so on, right? Very important, not taking away anything out of that. But as you grow to a leadership roles, you're also expected to understand the overall synergy of the company, overall priorities of the company, right? Which sometimes very often change, right? And align and put the organization first in terms of saying these are two competing priorities, but this is something that we believe is more important for the organization that you work on, which means that is the priority that you're going after. I mean, we've all seen scenarios where individual pods or individual teams take decisions based on what is good for their own team. As a product leader, you're supposed to step back from that, take a moment, have consciousness about which is important for individual teams, but also bring in a strong layering of saying, hey, you know what, this is a higher priority for whichever organization you're working on. That is what comes first, and then you can stack rank other parts of it. See, when we talk about prioritization being a very important role of a product manager, what do you prioritize based on becomes a problem, right? I mean, you can prioritize for your team's OKRs and successes, or you can prioritize for your group or a pod that you're part of, or a business unit you're part of, or you can put it as part of what are the big things that your company is really chasing after. You listen to your CEO talking in an all hands. What are the priorities he's spelling out, and how are your efforts aligned towards meeting those objectives? That, I would say, is one characteristic of a strong product leader. Shama, are we going to take questions in the last, or are the questions coming in, or how do we want to do this?
Raghu, we can take the questions in the end, but audience,
Sure.
if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A window. But as of now, Raghu, we can carry on. We do not have...
Feel free, Shama, to interrupt during the conversation if there are any interesting questions that are coming in. We'll try to take it up then and there and see how we can make the whole conversation more interactive. It feels fairly lonely sometimes to
I
go out a
understand.
40-minute monologue, So
Definitely.
trying to
So,
be the
audience,
bottom
please
there.
do not
Yeah.
make Raghu
Yeah.
feel lonely. So, let's have the interaction levels
I mean,
high here.
as long as you ensure that we are going to breeze through the 7 slides that I have, we are good. So feel free to interrupt. Feel free to put in your questions at any point of time,
I'll
guys.
do that. I'll
Right?
do that, Raghu. Thanks.
Let's go on to the next part, which is take mentoring very seriously, right? I mean, put together a team. I mean, you're largely going to be measured based on how well your team performs. Let's take the case of a cricket team, right? Let's say Virat Kohli, right? Let's say Virat Kohli continues to have a very lean patch of form, right? But the Indian team continues to win across all formats. I would possibly give Virat Kohli a long rope for him to find form if he's able to put together the team and get the team to perform. It's altogether a different thing if his lack of performance is going to affect his individual performance, right? Lack of performance is going to impact the ability to lead a team. That's what I meant, right? But build a team and see how the team is performing. And if your team is performing well, a lot of things are going to fall in place, right? There are very few instances when the team does well and the leader is, not seen as cutting. It does happen sometimes, but focus more on mentoring team. I would even say put yourself in a position where you're the most dispensable person in the team, right? I've seen strong leaders do that, right? That is also a great way for you to grow as an individual in the company, right? You don't want to be in a position to put yourself in a position you're too indispensable that they can't promote you or move you to a more impactful area for business, right? And in large businesses, priorities change a lot, right? I mean, if you want to be in a position where the best opportunities come towards you, you are always good in a position that you're building a strong team, right? Let me also give you one other example. I often state that every person's job in a company is to do half of your boss's work or her boss's work, right? That just lets your boss go and do a good part of his or her boss's work, right? Pretty much holds good for everybody except the CEO who doesn't have a boss, though you may at some level argue that the CEO still had as a board to report into, right? But put yourself in a position where you can your team can essentially run pretty much hands free without you, right? With minimum intervention and coaching that are required from you. If you're constantly finding yourself managing your team, guiding them, coaching them, and so on, it's fine if you're putting together a team and in the initial phases the team is starting together to come together and starting to form. But over a period of time, if you're not putting yourself in a position where the team can pretty much run on autopilot, right? You're doing something wrong, right? This also leads to a fact that you're constantly putting out fires, right? You're not able to think more strategically. I mean, you should be able to ideally let the team take care of the execution part on the ground and come in where there is required. This requires you to take mentoring seriously. This requires you to build people around you, right? And when I talk about mentoring, I'm not just talking about people who report directly into you, right? Product management is invariably a function that is going to have huge touch points across engineering, across business, across marketing. Nothing at all prevents you from mentoring somebody in business teams, right? Uh, Helping them call out something that they are doing that they should be improving on, applauding them when they're doing something right, calling out when something is slipping by, or even applauding when they do something great. This is all part of mentoring, right? And mentoring is not about growing people in your team, right? It's about growing everyone around you, right? And I mean, that is also this time when people start looking up to you and saying, hey, you know what? This is the person I can trust, and this is the person I can go to for a suggestion. I mean, that need not be restricted to your team. I mean, if you've been in these in any of these functions for 8 to 10 years, you know sort of what is expected from most of the roles, and it should absolutely never prevent you from taking individual responsibility for somebody, even if they're not in your team, right? Take a moment, take a time to spend, hey, you know what, I saw you taking that particular stand in that meeting. Probably you may want to take a different stand. Probably you come across as somebody who's very defensive about taking targets, or somebody who is defensive when people are called out, right? Have that conversation. I mean, focus on building a holistic workplace, as against focusing on your team and so on. The other characteristics of a strong product leader, we'll come to that in the next part that we're talking about. This is a very important part. Let's say you are this is a very typical scenario, right? You are in a cross team prioritization exercise or exercise where you're talking to business and other product team and engineering or whatever. Not so strong product managers tend to back their team more, support their team more, take decisions based on what their team wants to be supported on, so on, right? I'm not saying don't support your team, right? But be seen as somebody who's not very local to your own team or your own group. I mean, don't be a local guy or a local person who will basically back his teammates, his pod. Be a lot more inclusive of 1 minute, please. 1 minute. Sorry for the interruption, guys. So be seen as somebody who's taking the group along, right? I mean, you have a scenario where you have to pull up somebody in your own team, as against pulling up somebody from some other team. Feel free to do that in the overall context of the goals, right? A project is slipping, right? And you have your own team member who's the blocker. I mean, don't feel shy to call that out and bring it to the point that, hey, you know what, this is the right thing to do. This is the thing. That is how you bring collaboration and trust. And reach out to people, build a personal rapport with folks around the group, so that you are seen as somebody who's taking people along, right? Is approachable. People can talk to on things and be willing to move things across. Any comments, any interruptions so far? Just wanted to pause a minute for breath and any
Sure.
questions
So,
so
Raghu,
far?
we do have one question by Rahul.
Sure.
Do you want me to take that?
Please.
Sure. So he says you recruit and empower a team. What is the amount of focus time you would need to be a mentor? Since you, as a leader, would have to look at managing or contributing what your boss's leaders needs to do.
Can you repeat that question?
Right. You can see the question in the Q&A window as well. Raghu, I'll repeat in the meanwhile. You recruit and empower a team. What is the amount of focus time you would need to be a mentor? Since you as a leader would have to look at managing or contributing what your boss leader needs to do.
Okay. See, here is how I'll put it. I don't know whether there's a magic number there which says 30% or 40%. One of the things I've usually tried to do is get on with my reportees on what I call a peer working session, right? Where I'm working with that individual more as a peer rather than a boss, right? We are literally co-creating the solution for those 2 hours or whatever it takes. Let's take, we are putting together a complex solution, right? We are working through a feature and a specific quantification of that goodness is required, or articulation of the problem is required. What I'll often do is work with the reportee as a peer in that particular exercise. We'll just brainstorm, we'll just put together on a board, we will do whatever it takes, right? We're just brainstorming and getting together. That itself is a way of mentoring, right? Mentoring is not a one-on-one, very, very specific. It is not a Gyan session or a session where you sit and literally say, this is what you do. Very often you're mentoring based on the way you go about it. Hopefully you're learning from your boss by the way he runs a meeting, right? By the way he brings the group together towards a consensus, or towards the way he's putting together a presentation and articulating it to the leadership. These are all fairly a subconscious mentoring that you do, and mentoring is rarely one way, right? mentoring is always two-way. Just remember that. You're as much learning from your reportee as you are learning from your boss, right? That is the whole beauty of the knowledge industry, like the industry we are in, the IT, right? Where somebody in your team knows payments much better than you do, right? I mean, you've been in product management for say 15 years, but this individual who is just your reportee who has much fewer years of experience in product management may actually have much higher level of expertise in payments or any specific domain that you're working on. So mentoring is always a two-way street, right? Is there a specific answer in terms of what is the percentage of time you would spend on mentoring your team? I don't think there is a number like that, right? But do they constantly feel you're engaging with them? Do they constantly feel that they're learning, and more importantly, learning from you? Those are questions to ask in your one-on-one with your reportee. I mean, it's a good habit to have a conversation in which, I mean, how is your overall individual learning going on? I mean, leave alone the targets, leave alone the OKRs, leave alone the metrics you're chasing. Are you learning and growing as an individual? And am I helping you towards that goal? That's a very straightforward question to ask. I mean, if you're not asking that, you should probably look to ask that question. Did that answer your question, Rahul? I'm not sure.
I'm sure I did, Raghu. There is another question. Do you want to go?
Is he saying that, or are you?
Okay, let's ask Rahul himself then. So he has raised his hand. Rahul, do you want to come online and maybe respond? Okay. And Raghu, while he does that, we'll take another question. So this is from
Sure.
Shanawaz. Product leadership is more attributed to servant leadership. How much do you agree with this point? Can you please give your comments?
What is servant leadership? Let me ask that question before I try to answer that.
Shanawaz, please feel free to type your answers in the chat window. Raghu, we should carry on with the session, and as and when the comments come, I will, let you know about.
Okay, so the next part I have is about being self-aware, right? The more senior you get, very often you start getting a fairly fixed mindset. This is the style I operate. This is my working style. This is how I run meetings. This is how I interact with people. Right? Sometimes it can be pretty detrimental because you think you're a rock star and everybody else around you thinks you're a bozo, right? You think you're very easy to get along, but everybody in your team feels you're unapproachable or not empathetic enough, right? This as people grow more senior, right? Self-awareness is very important. I mean, however senior you are, it makes sense for you to look back and ask, hey, you know what? Am I doing the right thing? Am I approachable? Am I guiding my team well? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Am I willing to take those feedback as far as the learnings are concerned and take it in the right spirit and be able to work on it, right? That is a very important trait to have. I mean, for example, however senior you are, even if you are a chief product officer of Microsoft, there are still areas of improvement, right? There are still areas of improvement in terms of saying these are the things you could do better, right? Are you focusing on those? Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to accept your own fallacies and weaknesses? Are you able to address it at any level that you are in and be able to take positive feedback, provided it comes from the right source with the right context, and be able to internalize it and start working towards it, right? That I would say is, I mean, as you grow more senior, it's very easy to just live in your own bubble, right? And it's even worse if you've been in the same company too long, right? Imagine you've been in a company for 7, 8, 9 years, and by then there are certain things that are fairly set People expect a certain level of performance and certain level of thing from you. You build credibility possibly, and you're in what is called a classic comfort zone, right? You stop learning. You decide that's the way you operate, that's the way you work. You stop being curious. You stop being aware of which are the areas you can improve, and you just and then all the bad things start happening, right? Definitely they do if you're in a competitive environment, right? That to me is a very important characteristic as you grow. I mean, never stop learning. Never stop asking very basic questions. And this is also something you would find, right? I find very effective sometimes senior vice presidents who are not afraid to ask a very basic question, which is, hey, I don't understand this issue. Can you please explain this to me? And very often this is what happens, right? They have to negotiate, balance certain decision making, right? And some of them literally jump onto a decision without understanding the depth of it. When what they really should be asking is, hey, wait a minute, you want me to help you make this decision, right? But can you basically help me understand what we're talking about? Help me take about 5 minutes to explain it in very layman terms, the sort of problem we are solving. What are the trade-offs? What is this we are trying to solve? And then try to provide a solution, right? That is something many senior leaders are shy of doing. I mean, they think, I mean, as a SVP or a VP or a director or whatever it is, I'm expected to provide solutions, right? You will not unless you know the core of the issue. And the engineer there or a PM there has a much better idea of the specific problem. And if you're able to take that minute to spend 5 minutes understanding from his words, asking right questions in terms of what the problem we are trying to solve is, and then diving into solution, you have a much better way of approaching it. Take it as a more philosophical discussion stand too, right? You hear about people who start doing a degree when they're 60 or 70, right? That is to me being extremely self-aware and saying, hey, you know what, I can do better. I'm going to go and coach myself to be able to do this, right? This is one of my absolute favorite, right? No team wants to miss out on the targets, right? At the same time, you don't want every team to hit the targets all the time, right? So, I mean, one of the key traits of a good leader is they're willing to strike the right balance between setting an audacious goal, which is inspirational, makes the team stretch and so on, but also ends up taking up a goal which is largely achievable, right? I mean, take a team which is 40% on target month on month, right? I don't think you're going to have a very motivated team here, right? The team has drooping shoulders. I mean, they know they're not hitting the targets. They know they're under pressure. And all that is because some leader did not set the right goals, right? This is a
Raghu,
very
sorry to
interesting.
interrupt. I think we will take a few questions here before we move on because
Sure.
it's related to the last point and right now what you're discussing. So there's
Okay.
this question from Roop. So this is with regards to point one. She says between product roadmap focused on market requirements and organization goals, how do we take on seemingly conflicting paths? Example, market needs it, but it will delay a launch or make the product expensive. Who decides on the value it brings in?
That's a pretty interesting question. Which is why it is important for the product leadership also to be on the same page as far as the company goals are concerned. Which is why product leaders are absolutely expected to influence the course of the company's trajectory. Let me talk about that with a more specific example, right? Every company is going to set certain very overarching goals. It could be this year our focus is going to be on new customer acquisition, or this year it is going to be on not so much of customer acquisition, but more on improving customer engagement. Or it could be this year, it's going to be neither of those. We are going to, the priority for the company is trying to turn profitable, right? So the focus is on profitability, right? So, I mean, that is a decision that pretty much comes from, not from this chief product officer. That's a decision that comes from the CEO, right? Along with the board, which says, you know what, I mean, enough of new customer acquisition, enough of chasing sales numbers. Now let's focus on profitability this year. That's a decision that the board takes along with the CEO, right? Which then gets percolated across down to multiple levels. This is also what I called out in the put organization first, right? Yes, you may want to launch a very exciting product that customers are going to love, but if the company's priorities are towards gaining profitability, the product team's mission should absolutely to be towards seeing what are the levers that you are going to do, what are the things you're going to do this year to improve profitability of the company, right? So the direction always comes from the top, right? Which is also why, the product manager's job is among the best in the world, right? But it's still not as good as the CEO's job, right? Which is also a very challenging job. But the CEO sets the vision, the CEO sets the strategy and direction, and every team, every group, and obviously it's not a unilateral one man or a one woman decision. It's pretty much a collective decision based on where the organization is the trajectory the organization is expected to take, and the efforts need to be aligned for that, right? So if the organization priority is to turn profitable, and the chief product officer is putting together a strategy which will be the best customer acquisition strategy, right? There is something wrong here, isn't it? You want to go on to the next question?
Yes, Raghu. I mean, before that, I'd like to mention that the question that we answered before, so Rahul says that yes, his answers, lead by example and share what you did is a powerful way of informing. And coming to the servant leadership part that Sharnavaz had asked us, he says servant leadership is more of the leadership philosophy in which an individual interacts with other peers and forsakes personal advancement and rewards.
I'm just trying to, why do we talk about forsake personal advantages and development? I mean,
so his question was basically product leadership is more attributed to servant leadership. How much do you agree with this point? Can you please give your comments?
In the interest of time, can I request the individual to call me offline? I'm happy to have a conversation.
Sure.
I lack context to answer that question, and it may not be the best interest of this group to dive deeper into the question, if I may. Is it okay, Shanavas?
Yeah, he says okay.
You
Thank
can pass on my number to him, and I'm happy to have a
I'll
chat
do
with
that,
him.
Raghu. No worries. There is one more question, although from Kalyani. In my one-on-one with my mentees, they always say only positive things. They say they are learning, they are excited about the work, etc. How do I figure out that it is an honest feedback from their end?
That's an interesting question. Thanks for asking. That's an interesting question. It's not an easy problem to solve, right? And it's a problem that you can solve to some extent, but it's also an organization-wide challenge. It comes back to how open employees feel about saying, "Hey, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overworked, I'm not able to take the load." It's very often seen as a weakness, as an individual not pushing hard enough. I can't go and tell my boss I'm overstretched or overworked because the boss is going to think I'm not capable of handling the load. I'm not ready for this role. Will I get? But then everybody feels thing. It is as much a responsibility of the organization as individual leaders. I'll also chime in on this. There are strong organizational cultures which precede any influence individuals even as leaders can have. Again, it depends very much based on the level of company. If it's a smaller company, an influential leader can have significant sway over his group or her group. But in larger companies, even senior people are fairly a cog in the machine, right? So they have very little influence on the overall culture of the place. So if it's a big place and the culture is essentially about people not opening up about the whole thing, then that's one thing. There is, however, one thing you can do as a boss that can potentially help in many of the cases. See what sort of a personal relationship you have with your reportees. Do you have a personal relationship at all, right? And as a friend, I mean, do you go out for a coffee with the person? Do you go out for a drink with the person? Do you connect with the individuals at a personal level, right? In which case, they may come back to you and say, hey, you know what? I'm going through a tough time at home, or I'm going through a nagging illness, or a difficult situation at home, or just plain overworked. And I need a few weeks of downtime. That is something that may be possible in some cases, right? Depending on the personal relationship and trust you build. We talked about building trust, right? That is when the employee feels, yes, I mean, my boss sometimes may not be able to do all I want, but my boss is willing to listen to me sometimes, right? In a large organization, it's very often possible that even if a guy comes and tells you that I'm overworked and not able to handle it, you may not be able to help the individual a lot, depending on, in very large companies that can happen, right? But there are companies in which you may be able to cut the person as some slack for a few weeks to get the person to get back to shape. That may be possible. It again depends on a lot on the organization you're in. But I'll just leave you with this thought. There's a strong organizational angle involved in that. Are you able to talk to your HR and say, you know what, I don't want to name individuals here, but I know a lot of people in my team are overwhelmed, right? Is that something you're hearing from other managers too, right? Can you do a check with other managers anonymously to give you feedback on what they are finding without naming individuals? Those are in responsive organizations, HR would typically take that and sometimes try to do something about it. If it's a relatively young, aggressive startup, where sometimes these organizations find it difficult to pause for individual fatigue rather than pushing hard, then God bless you. But I don't know if, again, I answered that question directly. I don't know whether there's a direct answer to that. What did the individual feel? Did it answer your question? Can you check someone?
Yeah, they haven't typed their responses yet. But yeah, of course.
Okay.
Kalyani just typed saying that yes, it does.
Okay.
So let's move on with the session, Raghu. We'll take the remaining questions at a later point.
Sure. I think we are doing fairly well. 45 minutes into 5 of the 7. We're not doing bad. And this is about, I mean, I initially started with talking about risk taking, and I balanced it with most of the images for risk taking involved jumping out of a hill. I don't think jumping out of a hill is risk taking. Jumping out of a hill is stupidity, right? I could finally find a more balanced image for calculated risk taking, which is somewhat the sort of image I found finally. I mean, this is something you absolutely should to strive for as a leader. I mean, there was one organization I was talking to, I don't want to name that, which basically had a philosophy which said, I have your back, right? Which is essentially saying, go out and take some calculated risk. If they don't pan out, I'm going to support you on that, right? That is very important. I mean, let's take the case of Virendra Sehwag, for those of you who used to follow cricket or who follow cricket. The message to Virendra Sehwag was always that go and hit whatever you feel like hitting. We have your ass, or we have your back, right? Which is saying, on rare occasions when you're going to fail, when you're taking calculated risk, we are going to support you in the spirit of positive risk taking. This also encourages people. This also ties back to the goal setting that we talked about. We don't want a team that's setting the goals or meeting their targets every time after taking very, very conservative targets, right? You want teams to take risks beyond what they think they have, while at the same time ensuring it is calculated and sane. I mean, in one of the books I read about the OKRs at Google, which typically went, these are my goals, these are my stretch goals, right? I'm going to deliver 28% increase in user engagement this year, but my stretch goal is 32%, right? And this is what I'm going to try to do to achieve those, right? It's quite possible you don't even meet your basic goal, but it is important for people to feel that failing is okay, right? Failing is not a measure of poor effort or poor execution. This is also the example I like to give. Would you rather fail climbing Mount Everest by not being able to scale the last 1,000 feet, or would you successfully climb Nandi Hills, right? Nandi Hills takes about 1.5 hours to climb, right? You have successfully climbed a hill, right? When you set audacious goals, when you take bigger goals, you want people to be able to securely feel that if things don't work out, if things fail, my manager is going to still support me, right? I'm still going to say, hey, you know what? We did not meet our targets, but I'm going to give you an exceeds expectation rating for the year. That's because you did a great job, right? That is not to say it's okay to fail. It's not okay to it's that failure is accepted, but failure within the scope of what you had to do, you did all that you could. You moved every initiative that you could, but things beyond your control just didn't pan out, and which is also why targets are never very linear or very straightforward, right? It's an art and a science, right? You absolutely should encourage your team to come out, take goals which are bigger, take risks that stretch beyond them, and still feel if they fail with given the proper effort, they'll still not be penalized for that. Now, let's go to the last one, right? This is again a pretty interesting thing that I'll delve on for a few minutes. I mean, obviously, delegation is important. We've emphasized that. We have talked about how you want to be a leader who can disappear for a month and not be felt, right? That's taking things to an extreme, right? But when things don't go the way they are meant to, a leader is never expected to. A leader is expected to get in and get or her hands dirty, right? Being hands-on is something that I have a lot of respect for. That is not to say that you don't want to delegate. You just have to find the right balance. It could be joint working sessions. It could be working with your team on specific target setting, or just intervening and pulling through when you had a transition. Two people in your team left. I mean, you're going to return your PRD for 4 years, right? You still want to be able to work with a relatively junior PM and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to work with you on this exercise. I mean, that's what's called for at this point of time, even though we are trying to get more people, but this is a time for us to get involved and just get hands-on, right? This also keeps you closer to reality and closer to the execution path, right? You just don't want to be somebody who's just managing by delegation, right? Managing by team, right? I mean, you want to be a great manager, right? But at the same time, also find the right moment to step in, It could be when things are not going right. It could be a time when other situations require that you can't just be a manager and delegate, right? Uh, be fairly open to getting your hands on this. Those are the 7 points I had. Again, we'll just move into Q&A at this point of time, if that's what the team wants to do.
Raghu, just give me a moment to share my screen.
Sure.
Okay, so audience, just a quick reminder, please ask your questions in the Zoom Q&A window. And for the LinkedIn viewers, please post your questions in the thread and I will direct them to Raghu. So for the next question, Raghu, this is from Siddharth. You have worked in B2B product setup earlier and now at Flipkart in B2C. What are the key skills which are similar and different between these two setups for product leader?
That's again a pretty interesting question. It also depends a lot on the thing. Here is some of the distinctions I would make. I mean, this is also based on multiple stages of companies that these tend to be, right? I mean, it is very easy to lose the direct customer focus and focus on the buyer in a typical B2B scenario, right? In a B2C, your responses are fairly instantaneous. You know what your customers are. They're directly using your product, right? B2B has its own challenges in terms of B2B is essentially, in a lot of cases, B2B2C, right? The purchase or certain departments of the company are buying it. That is the company you sell to, and there's a certain other sets of users who are actually using those products, right? That is one thing to be fairly mindful of, right? In a B2B also, I usually focus a lot on who the customer really is. It is not the person who's actually buying the product, right? It's actually individual users of the product who are using it. That is one part that you need to be extra careful when you work on a B2B product. Slightly dig deeper into the customer angle, get more on what the customers are experiencing with your product. Are they get a stronger sense on that? That is one. In B2C, you can't even miss it. It will be really obvious to you. But in B2B, have a slightly more stronger focus on who your customers are. The second point I'll also talk about, and that's traditionally how most of these B2B versus B2C businesses work. B2B businesses need to be a lot more profitability path conscious. Right? If you're running a B2C, in the early stage, you can just focus on engagement. It gives you more time. Hopefully, somebody is funding you in the initial phases. But in a B2B, it's right from day one, you are evaluated based on your ARR, right? And how fast you can turn profitable. Your unit economics, all are very, very closely looked at. Whereas in many of the B2C businesses, you can literally continue to build business based on strong customer engagement and customer engagement on your product, usage of your product, how they interact with your product, and so on, while continuing to look at things like profitability slightly later, right? That is something that I will focus on. Profitability angle, stronger focus on the ARR and other metrics, which are very important guardrails for a B2B business. As far as B2C is concerned, one of the things you really need to be good at is being able to literally track every single interaction and dig very deep into the core user engagement on your product. That's how I'll leave. That would be my sense on looking at B2B versus B2B businesses.
Thank you for that, Raghu. And thank you for delivering such an amazing session. And we are really grateful for the insights that you have shared. And audience, please go ahead and ask your questions. We have a few more minutes left.
There's something interesting from Vijay. What are the steps to convince management team to move from strong product engineering to product management in the mid-career transition? That's a good question. And I think that's
yes, I was going to take that, Raghu, next.
I know a lot of IPL students and alumni want to know that. Absolutely. This is one thing I'll say. Okay. If you've been in product engineering for a fairly long time, your best bet to start with is in your own company trying to move into a product management role, right? And if the product management function is not well established, that's a great opportunity, right? What are the steps to convince management to move from a strong product engineering role? One of the things that I'll just use your own question to answer one part of it. The strong product engineering part that you talked about. This is your real test of your strong in the strong product engineering. If you're really strong and you've demonstrated credibility in the product engineering, and if you are able to put together a team which is already saying, hey, you know what, I've been in product engineering. I know that my team that I've put together can continue to run the ship without this. But what this organization needs is a stronger customer focus, stronger market focus. Can I transition into that to demonstrate how we can improve that, right? You want to case is product management is not established. See, that's always a challenge, right? The challenge is, again, many engineers find it tough to move into newer product companies. Managing a company transition and a role transition is not always easy, which is why my initial suggestion, Vijay, was to see if you can move and establish a product management function within your company. Your credibility is there. You possibly understand the customer. You understand the domain, right? You're probably well equipped to create some sort of a product management org in that company, right? Started there. If you can kickstart something and build something over a couple of years, that gives you, but you will still face a challenge, right? If the company does not have a product management practice, you're not going to have strong mentors, right? But at least use that company to move into the product management role. If the company does well and you do well, grow the product management arc. Or if you don't see it as something that can be grown, move on to another company. At least you have a few years of product management in you. You've done it in the company. You've made the transition. It's possibly easier for you to convince your next employer to give you a shot at product management. You know?
Thank you, Vijay, for asking that question. And Raghu, we have answered the questions in the answered section. If you can see in the Q&A window, you can have a look at them. And maybe if you would like to add some more points, and please go ahead. Meanwhile, audience, please scan the QR code on the screen for an elaborate, exclusive 30-minute session with industry practitioners like Raghu and clear all your doubts on transitioning to a product manager role.
Yeah, I think we have pretty much covered most of the questions, haven't we?
Yes, we have, Raghu.
Okay, do we want, okay, one last question, if somebody wants to ask it. And
yes, audience, please come online, raise your hands and I shall unmute you. You can come online and talk to Raghu directly and ask your questions.
And do share my number with Shanavas, whose question I couldn't answer.
I will, Raghu, definitely. All right, then. So in view of the time constraints, we will end the Q&A here. Thanks for the participation, audience. It was great having you all here. And for any further questions, like Raghu said, you can connect with him over LinkedIn or put a note to me and I'll share his number with you. Now, for the most exciting part of the evening, Raghu, you'll have to help us pick the best question. Like I promised them before, we'll be rewarding them with a free digital course offered by the Institute. So please let us know who the award goes to. Audience, while Raghu picks the best question, please go ahead and share your feedback and let us know your experience and learnings from the webinars hosted by the Institute. The link is in the chat window. And it will help us plan and deliver the many such insightful webinars in the future. So your feedback matters to us. Please take your time and share your feedback. Yes, Raghu, do we have a winner?
1 minute, please. I'm trying to decide between Kalyani's and Roop's question. And finally, I'll make my decision on Roop's question. And I'll talk about why Kalyani's question is important. It's important from an organization perspective that it's important as leaders that you elicit strong feedback. But I'll just tilt towards Roop's question more because that particular question is more towards a product management use case that we are talking about here. And this is a conflict that every single product manager faces, right? Seems very obvious, but how does product strategy tie into overall company strategy? I mean, one could write multiple books on it. So my vote for the best question could be between product roadmap, focus on market requirement, and organization goals. How do we take the seemingly conflicting path, but will delay the launch of the product expensive, make the product expensive? Who decides the value it brings in? That would be my vote for the best question. Congratulations.
Perfect.
Roop.
Thank you, Raghu.
But thanks everybody for taking time to ask that question.
Yes.
I mean, everyone who asked the question was a winner today. I don't mean to say.
Absolutely. So, Roop, congratulations on winning the free digital course, and we will get in touch with you shortly with the reward.
Hey, congratulations, Roop.
Yes. We have enjoyed having you with us, Raghu, and it's been a complete pleasure. Very insightful session. So please accept this certificate of appreciation from the Institute, a small gesture. The QR code on the certificate will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that we have created for you with the recording of this video.
Okay.
Right? Please share it with your network, and we will do the same. We will share it. We'll share the webinar on our YouTube channel. So all the audiences who want to revisit this video, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. We are grateful for the time and effort you've taken, Raghu, to share your insights from the years of experience and research that you've had in the industry.
Thank you. Really appreciate you. Having me over. Really enjoyed the interaction. Thanks, guys.
Hey, man, I'm certain that our audience will definitely benefit from this methods you suggested and get ahead their career. Thank you once again for joining us, Raghu.
Thanks, Shama. Thanks for having me over, and Pratibha. Bye.
Bye. And audience, thank you for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. Do not forget to register for our webinars tomorrow, and please fill out the feedback forms. With that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night.